And welcome back to another episode of TWiP Weddings. Once again, my name is Bruce Clark, and I am joined again. This time we're branching out. We're not in this fancy sports car. We've got a minivan because we got a few more. We got a special guest on the show this week, so no room in the Fiat for just the three of us. But I'm joined by Mr. Robert Evans, Mr. Brian Caparici, and we've got a very special guest this week, Mr. Gary Fong. Welcome, guys.
Good morning.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
So, for those maybe who aren't familiar with Gary, I don't know how you could not know who Gary Fong is, but for those who aren't familiar with Gary, I want to call you, Gary, a kind of a true Renaissance man. He's an amazing photographer. You're an inventor. You're an educator, a businessman, a musician, a family man. You're kind of one of the true Renaissance man. But for those who kind of aren't familiar with you and your work, maybe give us just a brief overview. Who is Gary Fong?
Well, Robert knows me from being a wedding photographer in Los Angeles for 20 years. So I started out just shooting at home. I mean, I started charging $150 per wedding, and then I just built my clientele up until I was doing really well. And then right around the end of that, someone came out with a digital camera, shot at a wedding, and took a picture of a cake, and she said, "Wow, that looks pretty good," and I was, a little bit kind of freaked out by that. So then I started a photo lab, which became Pictage, and then that went on for a nice little while, and with that, running that for a while, then I retired at 42, and moved over to France. And then when I was there, I was just kind of thinking about all the blown out shots I had to correct while I was at Pictage. And then I was sitting in the hotel room, and I saw the lamp, like you've got behind you, the room lamp, and thought, wow, this is really pretty lighting. It lights the whole room as well as the subject. So basically what I wanted to do was stick a lampshade on a flash. And that was 10 years ago. That was called the Light Sphere. And I can't believe it survived 10 years, but we're big as ever. So that's pretty much... I guess would sum it up. I look at my Wikipedia and I read all the stuff that it says that I did, and I don't really remember them.
Well, that's awesome. Well, we're really happy to have you on the show, Gary. I mean, you're a wealth of information. I think we could talk about multiple topics with you and pick your brain on so many things. But the reason we've got you on today, and sort of specifically what we want to talk about this week, is just about safeguarding images. And we're going to be talking about sort of archiving and backup for wedding photographers. And one of the reasons we brought you on is it's kind of something that hit kind of very close to home for you recently, and we're going to talk about that because I think that's kind of the impetus behind some of this stuff as well. But before we dig into that discussion, we just want to remind our audience again how you can participate in the show. So we've got a couple of different ways you can interact with us. First off, you can visit the website at thisweekinphoto.com/weddings. There you're going to find the show notes that accompany each episode, and it'll contain links to everything that we mentioned on the show. I'm sure we're going to have quite a few different links to things on today's show. You can also leave your comments and your feedback for us in the comments section. Also, if you have a question or a suggestion for a topic for a future episode, you can email us. Our email address is twipwed@thisweekinphoto.com. Or if you prefer using social media, just include the hashtag TWiPWed to your post, and we'll keep an eye out for those as well. And we're also on Instagram, so if you're on Instagram, you can follow us, and we're at TWiPWed. Well, we're getting there. We'll get there. Again, you guys got to send me some content to get pushed out onto our Instagram account. So. But let's jump into the show again. We're changing that format up a little bit. We're gonna jump into our main discussion right away. So again, send us your feedback. Let us know what you think of this particular format. So I think if you were to list wedding photographers' worst nightmares, I don't know, maybe we'd all have different opinions. But I think one of the biggest nightmares would probably be losing a client's wedding images. That would probably be at or near the top of the list. Would you guys all agree?
Agree.
Absolutely.
So I think capturing and kind of protecting your clients' memories, that's why they hired us. So we want to talk today, we're going to take a deep dive into backup and archiving for wedding photographers. And so kind of the impetus behind this a little bit is a bit of a personal story on Gary's end of things. Gary, do you mind sharing with us just kind of briefly kind of what happened and what's kind of driving this for you, reinforcing the importance of this for you?
Yeah, sure. January 11th of this year, our home got completely burned out in a fire. I mean, leveled to the ground, and that was awful. But it's not like I didn't see it coming. I've seen that coming for all my professional life, and the remarkable thing about it is I didn't lose a thing in that fire. I didn't lose any images. I didn't lose any of my instruments. I didn't lose any of my anything that was replaceable. Even like things like I had a little school book that had my report cards from kindergarten all the way to high school and things like that. I didn't lose that because I've always been a freak about fire. I mean, when I used to lecture way back, probably 20 years ago, about wedding photography, and I shot film, I used to describe how I would have the film go inside one of those, those fireproof lunchbox-looking things that you can get at Home Depot, because I didn't want the car to catch on fire in between the lab. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, that looks like it holds money, so I would slap a biohazard sticker on it so no one would, steal it. But the only wedding I ever lost out of 1,000 was one that UPS lost, on the way to the lab, and we got a handsome settlement for the couple. But we never lost anything because, as I'll show, I'm going to tour you around the house today and show you how freaky I am about my storage. But when the fire happened, one of the things that I was really comforted in was knowing that our stuff didn't get lost. Now, unfortunately, my wife lost a lot of her stuff, and I was really bugging her and saying, I really think you should back that up. I'm just putting this out there. And she said, yeah, I'll get to it, but my iPhone's full and all that other stuff. So she lost pretty much everything she had. But what was nice is I was there for everything. So I was there for the first birthday. I was there, all the events. So we had photos of everything. But yeah, we were able to save everything, and I'm just kind of like on this thing to help my friends have this discussion about, like, just have a fire drill in your head. What would happen today if your entire house went down? You've got a pile of events over there, and not only would you lose everything, you'd owe money, right, to all your clients, and probably lose your career. So it's about the most important discussion we could have.
Yeah, I think so. I agree. A lot of people, these days are operating their businesses out of their homes. They're not generally running out of studios as much anymore. I know a lot of my fellow friends. They might not live in a house. They might live in a condo complex, and so they're at the mercy of their neighbors and whatnot. There was a big condo fire in our city recently. Somebody put out a cigarette in a diaper pail out on a patio, and it burned the whole condo complex to the ground, right? So I want to ask Brian and Robert, have you guys ever had any disasters with photos or loss of photos?
I never have, as far as I did, early on in digital. I had a bad card where I had some problems with it, and then I sent it back to the manufacturer, and they did recover the files and then send me a new card, which I thought was amazing. And then I think one other time I had another issue, but then of course after having that happen the first time, you learn, don't even mess with the card. I just sent it right to them, and again they got the images off, recovered them, sent them back to me. But I would say within the last 10 years, everything's been pretty rock solid. But yeah, like I've never had, big disasters like that.
Brian, how about you? Have you?
No, I mean, knock on wood, I've not had the catastrophe of having a fire or anything like that, or anything being stolen or broken into or anything like that. I have had it where, not that it happens frequently, but maybe once a year, maybe once every other year, one of my hard drives, like if we're going to get into the technical side of things, I'll explain what I do, but I have a storage device that holds 8 hard drives, and so I have had it where, like, one of my hard drives in there, I have a new hard drive for every single year, where one of the hard drives would go just randomly, would just go corrupt on me, and fortunately, because I have 2 backups of every hard drive off-site, it hasn't resulted in anything, any kind of data loss or anything where I'd have to go back to a client and say, sorry, I lost your photos. Even if it was 5 years ago, I never want that to happen. So I have had it where hard drives have gone corrupt on me. I think that's not unreasonable to think it's going to happen in your career as a wedding photographer, that a hard drive will go corrupt on you. So even something as non-catastrophic as that, certainly not as dramatic as a fire, that kind of event could easily happen to anyone at any point in time.
Yep. Yeah,
I guess
it's always
just as easily as a fire could happen, but a hard drive going corrupt is not going to say very likely to happen, but it kind of probably is going to happen to you at some point. So having that kind of contingency plan that we'll talk about today is super important. And if I didn't have that, I would have had to go back. If I ever had a client, my 2010 hard drive just died actually last week, so it's kind of timely for me. Unfortunately, I had the backup of it. So, you know, if I didn't have that backup, if I ever had a 2010 client come to me that said, hey, can I order some more prints, or can I redo that album, or for whatever reason, I would have had to been like, that hard drive is gone. So even a simple thing like that is super important to protect yourself against.
yeah.
I think the thing with hard drives too, that I've heard this before, so this is not my statement, but you have to think of a hard drive. It's not if, but when it's going to go out.
Absolutely.
You know, you have to think of that way. You know, a hard drive isn't forever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want
The neat thing about this kind of thing, where we're talking about hard drive backup and everything like that, it runs exactly parallel to the fire safety strategies. It's the same thing. You want to have your stuff protected. So this is kind of the larger thing, is protecting your data, really, not just from fire, but from bad copies or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's almost like, even if we, like in this whole discussion, I mean, I know that Gary's situation is something that we can talk really specifically about, but I think, like Gary is saying, that almost, like what Gary has done to protect against what happened to him is the same kind of methods and systems and processes that every photographer should be doing, regardless of what kind of situation could happen. I mean, these methods would protect against theft, would protect against fire, would protect against any other kind of catastrophe, but the same things would protect against a hard drive going corrupt on you. So having that kind of rock-solid plan, I guess if we just pull out and look at the bigger picture, some photographers listening right now might be like, oh, well, you know, we've got fire alarms, we've got this, it's like, no, it's like we're not just protecting against fire, we're protecting against anything that could happen to these hard drives. So having a rock-solid plan for any kind of situation is super important.
Yep, I agree. So I think I want to start the conversation sort of at even before we get to the archiving and the backup discussion. What sort of steps do you guys take when the actual image is being captured to back it up at that point in time? Or is everybody now shooting with cameras with dual card slots to sort of eliminate that probability of having a failed memory card?
Yeah, I know most of the Sony cameras, well, not all of them, but some of them have dual card slots, so I will do that, and then I will back up, download my cards, fairly right away after if I get home late, I may do it in the morning, but then, download my cards right away, and then, immediately back them up to something else, so I have a couple copies.
Yeah. Gary, what about you? What's your process in terms of the actual, the image capture time, in terms of being able to have that redundancy?
Well, so my strategy is that the safest place to hold a memory card is inside the camera, because all the pins are connected, and if you drop that camera, the camera will shatter, but your drive is protected by this big chunk of reinforced whatever it is. So I always left my memory cards inside the camera and never pulled them out. Pulling them out, swapping them, whatever, is just asking to lose it or accidentally format over one because you ran out of space on one, and so I always left it inside what I called the best container, which would be the cameras itself. Then when the cameras were back from the event, I would take them and I would stick them on. I don't know if you guys have seen these, but I'll just walk you over because I have one right here. This is kind of a cool thing. These are called, and this isn't the only product that does that, but this one's My Passport Wireless. This is 2 terabyte, and you can just drop a SD card right in that slot there, and then it'll automatically back it up. And I think what I like about this is it just goes directly into here, and then it'll just make a carbon copy. Like a lot of times we go, oh, we just need the DCIM folder or the blah 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 folder, and we don't take the other folders that go with it. And I don't know what they're for, and I don't know why it's important. But what I like about this is it makes an exact carbon copy.
Nice.
And then from there, that all gets edited, and then our deep storage. And I don't know if you guys saw it, but we're now using the 200-year Blu-ray DVDs. Have you heard of those?
No.
So the thing about hard drives is that there's 2 things that can kill it. The data. One is magnets. I did a nice controversial video on that one. And then the other one is when it's not spinning, that platter is open to corrosion. So if your drive is sitting here like this is where the rust and the oxidation can occur. It's actually safer to keep it running, but that lasts for a very, very little amount of time, and Blu-rays really don't last very long at all. So what we do is we have, I'll just take you over to my garage here.
For the audio listeners, we're doing a walkthrough here with Gary, so he's showing us some stuff.
Okay, it's kind of a mess. Hang on just a second. Let me move the trike out of the way. Okay, so we have this intermediate safe, and then I was about to.
We just about got Gary's safe password.
Okay, so I don't know if you can see, but now we're inside this guy, and there we have what's called these right here. These are archival gold BDRs, and they're about $1 a megabyte. Or is that gigabyte? They're about $1. Yeah, so they're $25 per disc. But this thing it's called Scratch Armor, and it's rated to last 200 years. All you need to do is have your receipt, and if it fails, you just show them the receipt at year 197 or whatever, right? And then what we do is we take these guys, make 2 copies of them. One goes into our intermediate safe, which is here at the house, and then another one goes to our safe deposit box. But like I put our wedding, birth photos, and all the scans in the house. And by scans, I mean this. So what happens is, you're going to think, wow, this guy's a freak. But I'm glad I'm a freak. Okay, so we walk inside the house, and then we've got this little scanning table here. And so, I don't know if you can see that. Can you see it?
Yep. So again, I'll try and describe, or try and describe for our audience kind of what they're seeing, because again, keep in mind we got a lot of our listeners are listening audio only. So.
Oh yeah. So this is it's a Fujitsu ScanSnap, and it's awesome because it's just wicked fast. You can throw like 50 sheets in there, and then it'll just like scan them, and it'll throw it onto here into the computer, which is then hooked up to a Dropbox. Now, I don't trust Dropbox, but I do trust Dropbox because what it'll do is it'll reconcile with my IOSafe at my office downtown. And I don't know if you've heard of the IOSafe, but the IOSafe is a black box. It's a RAID drive, but what makes it different is it's fireproof and waterproof. And it's also an NAS. It's a secure private cloud network access server. And what I love about it is that, first of all, the transfer speeds are incredibly fast. You transfer up to Google Cloud or Apple's iCloud or whatever, it's very slow because you've got a bunch of people accessing those drives. This is a secure one-to-one network between you and a box that's somewhere else. That's fireproof, waterproof. And so if this house goes down, everything's backed up over there. And so all my paperwork, everything that might be important, or we don't know that it's important now. You know, if you want to keep stuff and go, oh shit, I threw that away, just have some very, very easy and convenient way to capture all of it. And then once that's done, we're impervious to any loss at this point.
So what's that? Tell us a little bit again about that safe itself. So you said it's sort of a safe and a NAS device all in one. What's it called again?
Oh, it's called IOSafe. In fact, if let me see if I can. I don't remember how to do it, but it's IOSafe. IOSAFE. Let me see if I can find it.
Yeah, and we can include a link to it in the show notes for this post. So while you're kind of looking that up, so this is basically an all-in-one. It's not just a network-attached storage device. It's in an actual safe that's going to be fire and waterproof. What's somebody looking at for a solution like that? If somebody was looking to pick one of those up and add that to their.
You know, they're different prices. You can get the massive ones. I think this one right here. Can you see me now? I'm screen sharing.
Yep.
Okay. So this is the IOSafe 24, and NAS means Network Address Server, and this is what it's like. I think it's about $2,500, But it comes with data recovery service, which is neat. So they'll back it up to their own cloud. But what I like about this is that nobody can hack into your system. If you suspect you're being hacked, all you need to do is unplug the cord, and that's the end of it. So people like, like Robert, who have to deal with celebrities and things like that, it's a beautiful thing to have your own closed circuit cloud, because this cloud is not open to anybody else. It's just you, and it's the same thing that you would have with Apple or Amazon or whatever photo sharing, but it's safe. So, and you'll see down here it'll talk about like how it's private cloud security. You guys would really love it. If you saw one, you would just go, wow, I couldn't feel safer. And it's neat. Oh, the other thing I wanted to tell you also is if you get something like this, make sure it's on a bottom floor and next to the fireplace. That's important.
Okay, why is that?
Well, because the fireplace is the most important, the solid structure in your house. If you look through disaster areas where there's hurricanes or fires or whatever, you'll see the last thing that's standing is the fireplace. Because the fireplace is, made for fire. So being next to the structure or actually inside, if you're going to leave on a holiday, just grab your whatever safe and put it inside the fireplace, and you can't have a more secure place than that. And it's in our house, it was amazing. I had a fire safe, one of those fire safes that you can buy at Home Depot, and I put it on the bottom floor, and I just butted it right up next to our fireplace. And we recovered it, and inside there was negatives, cash, photos, but more incredibly, there was a hard drive in it, and the hard drive spun up. We got all the data off it, and it was so hot it burned. There was literally flames for like 4 days. It melted a hole in the safe, so the top of the safe was exposed. But by the time they got to it, there was a little bit of heat that had gone in. But we saved everything. Now there were 2 safes in the house. One, unfortunately, my wife kept up in a different spot, not on the ground floor. And what happens is, fire rises in a flame. So if you're on the 2nd floor, it's going to get the heat from the bottom, then it's going to fall to the ground. But if you're on the concrete basement, heat doesn't come up from the bottom. So if you butt it up against the fireplace, you have 2 sides protected out of the cube. And it's a lot of people will go, oh, this is awesome, I got a fire safe, but it's not going to help you if you put it in the attic. The attic's going to have all the time in the world to cook, so right. It's all these things that could make the difference between you wasting your time or having a successful disaster.
Absolutely. So I want to ask Robert and Brian, do you guys have like a fire safe? What kind of physical means do you use to secure your hard drives or your backup systems?
I don't have a fire safe, but I do have an offsite backup as well as cloud.
Brian, how about you?
I don't have a fire safe, but my backup strategy is in such a way that I've always got 3 copies of every hard drive in 2 different places at any one given time. So for me, again, it's not protected because it's connected to my computer, but if my office were to burn down, then at home I've got a copy of everything that's here at my office at home. So the chances of my home burning down and my office burning down at the exact same time, unless someone listening to this wants to go and test me and go and light fire on both my places.
Or if you really piss off your wife.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, no, I don't have a fire safe with the hard drives in it, but I do have a really redundant system so that at any one given point in time, if one of my places were to have a catastrophe happen, I would have no problem.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because all of us have like another location, like an office or a studio, where we have stuff. But I know a lot of photographers that don't. A lot of them are home-based businesses. They're working out of their home. So I think, a fire safe is going to be that extra level of protection if they're looking to protect stuff, but they can't get it off-site somewhere.
I can actually comment on that, Bruce, because I only got this office here about 2 months ago. So up until then, I had a studio that was attached to my home. So although it was separate, it was still there. So if the home were to burn down, my office probably would have burnt down as well. So what I did in that situation is I would have one copy of everything in my office, or sorry, two copies rather, because I would always have a daily backup. But then my offsite copy I actually kept at my in-laws. So every single week I would go there, grab that copy, bring it back to my studio, and in the meantime, that second copy was at my in-laws. So I would never actually have all three copies in my studio at any one given point in time. So my offsite was just somewhere else that was not in my home. And I think that's a really clean solution for any photographer. I think even if you have, and maybe Gary, you can comment on this, but even if you have a fireproof safe, I still wouldn't advocate for having all your copies in the same building at any one given point in time. I'd always still recommend having an offsite copy. Maybe Gary, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, you have to have it offsite, and that if you this is an intermediate storage. This is just, because you get too busy to go to the offsite place, right? And throw it in somewhere. But one thing that I really wanted to mention before, because you were asking about the cost of the IOSafe, I want to put out there that the cheapest primary backup you can have is the original memory cards. And memory is so inexpensive these days, and you're paying a pretty handsome fee to shoot. Just don't ever, reformat those cards. You can afford to buy a new set per event, and how do you know that you haven't used that set of cards for 14 times and it's about to fail? But you can take your SD or compact flash card, stick them in an envelope, call it the Jones Smith wedding, take it to your safe deposit box and drop it off after you have working copies. And that's your ultimate backup, because I've had it before where you copy from a memory card to a drive and you think you got it all down, and then there is one corrupt file in there that didn't get copied correctly. It's been twice that I had to go back to the original things, and thank God I didn't format over them. So what I do is I keep the original cards to the important things.
Yeah, that's a good tip. I actually saw, the other day they had like 64 gig card, like a 2-pack of 64 gig cards on for a B&H for like $90 or $80. So you can build that in as a, part of your cost of doing business. So that's a great suggestion.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you guys a little bit about, do you guys perceive, or is there a difference for you between backup versus archiving? And I think this goes back maybe a little bit even to discussion a little bit about film as well. But I see backup as more immediate. It's things that are happening sort of on your current stuff, whereas archiving is the ability to go back and get at some of these assets. Like in the film days, you would have had your negatives, but now you've got your digital files going back I don't know how many years. Tell us a little bit, Robert. What's kind of your approach in terms of backup versus say archiving?
Okay, so I'll just give you a real quick how I do it workflow. I'll come home for an event. I will download my cards to an external hard drive, and then I typically will work on the job. Call my job. If I'm doing the Lightroom or whatever, when it's done, then I have my edits, and then as soon as I have my best RAW files and my best JPEGs, those go onto my server, and then I leave on that external drive. I still have a folder, best RAW, best JPEG, and then all the other images which I leave there, and then ultimately that hard drive, once it fills up, that external hard drive becomes kind of a backup that I stick on my shelf, and then of course my best JPEGs then go up to SmugMug and or Pictage, depending on what it is.
Okay, so you're using those as kind of your offsite storage. So you're using a cloud solution for the offsite piece.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, I have a bit of a different workflow. I'm kind of like Gary a little bit. I'm pretty anal about my data, protection. I worked in IT for 16 years, and I saw clients lose data because they weren't backing things up properly, and even just friends and family have lost personal photos and things like that, because we're in this digital age, which is great, but it's also nobody's printing stuff anymore, which is kind of sad, and now they lose their hard drive and they lose all their family's memories. All right, so not just us as wedding photographers, but I think our clients are losing images that way. And so I'm pretty anal about it. So I have kind of a 3-2-1 strategy. So I have, I'll have the cards right away after the wedding. I come home, they're downloaded. Then right away, those images are on a main working drive, but that main working drive is also automatically duplicated to a Drobo. So I'm using a Drobo as my second redundant copy, and that happens overnight. I just run a program on my Mac called ChronoSync, and it just automatically synchronizes one drive to another. And then the next morning, because usually I'm doing that fairly late at night, I'll take the cards upstairs with me, and they actually sit on my nightstand, so that if something were to happen in the middle of the night, I would grab my wife, my dog, and the memory cards in that order on my way out the door. So worst case scenarios, I'm not going to lose those images. I would still have the memory cards for it. But then the next morning is when I'll do my backup to an external drive, and then that external drive gets rotated out as quickly as possible to the studio. But I'm also using a cloud backup solution as well. So I'm using a service called CrashPlan, and it's constantly feeding that data up to the cloud. The downside with that, and I think Gary kind of alluded to this, is it's not a private cloud. So there is that potential, I guess, of somebody getting at it. An online service could potentially just go away, so you can't always put all your eggs in that basket, because who knows, they could fold their tent tomorrow and then I have no backup. But there's also the problem of just the bandwidth. I mean, we're shooting, we got these new cameras out now, they're shooting big files from a typical wedding. It might take a couple of days to get that data pushed up into the cloud. So what are your guys' thoughts kind of on the cloud storage? Gary, you kind of alluded to, I think I know your thoughts on cloud storage, but I want to sort of get your opinion on cloud storage for backup for wedding photographers.
Yeah, so it's really competitive now, which is nice. And there's Amazon Prime has free unlimited backup. Mm-hmm. I think Apple is actually the worst value of them all. Something like, I think it's $240 per year to store 1 terabyte, which is very, very small. And then
well, they're hurting for cash, so they got to make as much as they can.
Yeah. And then there's Google Play that has unlimited for 4 megapixel files, and there's so many options out there, but I don't trust them. And for example, so much of our lives is on Facebook, and if Facebook went away, then we would have so few of our family pictures with any kind of thing on it. So why don't you guys just do a question? I'm going to go grab something and be right back.
Yeah,
well, I have an input too. So we're talking about a subject that I think is very scary. I mean, people we're bringing all this gloom and doom, but it's important to think about it. But I just want to throw something out there that I do. Yes, we want to back up our images, and yes, we want to back up our clients' images. But one of the things that I do that's in my contract is, of course, in today's world, everybody wants a copy of their images and their files, and everybody has different policies on whether they charge for it or whether they give them away or however that works. But when I pass those images along to my client, I have a clause in my contract that says, once I do that, I am no longer liable for storing their images. Once I hand them those files, it's not that I erase. I have them. I want them for my own reference. I want them to go back, blog posts, whatever I want to reference from past weddings.
Yep.
But in my contract, it says that I am no longer liable for storing their images, and that they are. I educate them on, some of these things that we're talking about. I talk to them about hard drives. I tell them to put a copy of their files, of course, in a cloud storage, in a safe deposit box, and I tell them what I said earlier. It's not if, but it's when, that hard drive will fail. And then beyond that, then there's another one that says, if they come back to me over a period of time, and say they want their files back, then it's a minimum $1,000 fee. The way I put it in my contract, $1,000 fee for storage and data recovery. So if it ever comes to that, then I could if I wanted to. I don't have to enforce that, depending on what their situation. When Gary Fong comes to me and goes, "Oh my gosh, my house burned down." Well, of course I would be an ass if I said, "Oh, I'm going to charge you $1,000 to get your files back," which might work because maybe the insurance is going to pay for it anyway. But it's all a situation. But by removing yourself of that liability, and if you literally want to take it one step further, you could make them then also sign a separate form that says, "I understand that by accepting these files, the studio is no longer liable." Blah 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 blah. So it's just something for you guys to think about. You don't have to "Oh my gosh, I'm responsible for every wedding to store it for the rest of my life." No, let yourself go of that liability. And of course you want to protect your images, for yourself and your family images, but don't hold on to that burden of every single client portrait, wedding, bat mitzvah, whatever you shoot.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really, really good point, is having that in, in some sort of something in your contract or an agreement that they sign when you hand over the images. I like to try to educate my clients as well. So, again, we are in this digital world, and if we're including digital, images in their package, that's something we try to work with them and educate them about backing up their images and having them in multiple locations and not putting all their eggs in one basket. Because, a lot of people just don't know. Like, they think it's on their hard drive, and their computer's never going to fail, and they're never going to have a disaster, and they don't want to ever think about those things. Nobody ever does, and a lot of times it's not until something happens, right? And Gary, you can probably, you sounds like you've been kind of on top of this and aware of this for a long time too, but it reinforces it. I mean, even you mentioned like your wife lost a lot of her images, right? So this kind of is that, pushes people to think about these things, I think, even more.
Yeah, this I went over to my bookshelf to get this. Well, I was talking about the question, do you trust the cloud? And you can trust the cloud if you want, but it could go. You don't control it. This is a really cool product. It's called My Social Book, and what it does is you can take your entire Facebook and it'll print it out in yearbook form. And they do such a nice job with it. You can, choose to put in the comments or whatever, but it literally looks like a yearbook, and you can put a year of your life in it. And what I found about Facebook is I never go back to the old posts,
Mm-hmm.
and print it out like this. It's really kind of cool. So if Facebook should disappear, all of my little thoughts and shares and cute little pictures, I've got these in a safe, and so I'll always have them. And
that's really cool.
This is really cool, and it's not that expensive either. It's under mysocialbook.com. But these days, social media tends to be the way that we preserve our memories, families, just because it's so convenient. But then again, it's all in the cloud, and the cloud could disappear. I mean, if Facebook just disappeared tomorrow, how sad would we all be? Like, oh, I had that cool video of my son hitting the first home run, and it's So,
I'd kind of be happy if Facebook disappeared.
Would it erase some evidence, Robert?
No. Just there's so much, noise in Facebook. I use Facebook primarily just for work. I don't put my family memories on there. That's just me. But that's the way I've always been. But it's just, we don't need to go into it. Why I'm annoyed with Facebook, but
yeah. It's the cloud, right? So, but yeah, so I don't know. That's kind of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think the cloud, you never know, right? Any of these services that are around today could just change tomorrow or poof, be gone. So, I think the nice thing now is, like you say, there's a lot of choice, there's a lot of competition out there. So, you could probably even use multiple services. Google Photos now gives you unlimited storage. Flickr gives you unlimited storage. So, I'm a kind of a proponent is I'll kind of throw them at all these services, and then if one of them goes away, at least I've got, at least some of the others are going to be around. But I also take matters into my own hand and make sure that I have local copies, external drives, and I think it's important too. I want to talk a little bit about changing technology. We looked at we look at hard drives today. We look at DVDs. You look at floppy disks, right? I think you don't know where technology is going. Look at Apple recently changed the USB standard, right? So I think delivery via USB now isn't even a reliable method, because you could pull this thing out 5 years from now and not have anything to actually plug it into or connect to. Something that we one of the approaches we use when we're selling an album with a client is to pull out a floppy disk and say, what if this was your parents' or your grandparents' wedding album? What would you do with it? And it kind of hits that, that hits home for them, right? And they think, oh yeah, geez, we wouldn't have any way of looking at these. And we say, well, the USB or the DVD, that's today's version of the floppy disk, right? And that kind of reinforces to them that, yeah, we should be getting this stuff printed, or investing in an album and doing that. So it becomes a little bit of it's not a scare tactic, but it's a bit of it's a tool to help you kind of sell your products as well, and the importance of printing and getting those things off of the computer. or
Right.
off your cell phone.
I kind of do the same thing. I use that same analogy. What if I gave you your files on a floppy disk? How would you access them today? And I kind of use that. I like how you use it as a sales tool, Bruce. That's great. I used it kind of as like when I'm passing the files off to them and I'm saying, look, I'm no longer liable for this, and I'm telling them how to store and archive them. But that is one of the things that I also educate them on. Like, think about the future. I said, someday you will not be able. So you have to obviously keep up with the backup as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Gary, I want to ask you kind of where do you think things are headed from a technology standpoint? Is hard drives going to be? Are we going to see those go away, or where's everything headed? If you had to peer into your crystal ball.
I think things are headed direct to cloud, and it's moving in that direction so fast. If you stop and pause and look at what's going on, things are going direct to cloud. Like if I, take a picture on my mobile phone and I just share it, boom, it goes up to cloud. And a lot of these iPhones have limited memory, and then people just, wipe out whatever's on there. That ability to go straight to the cloud makes everything tell me that soon there will be. That's weird that you have a storage device on your actual capture unit, because, click, oh, it's cloud. My kids will probably just go click, oh, and there it is. It'll probably be that fast. Click, and it's like right on your computer screen, right? So there's always going to be backups, but I think we're going to be shooting direct to cloud.
The Sony cameras kind of have a lot of the newer cameras that are coming along now, particularly the mirrorless cameras, without getting too far down a rabbit hole of mirrorless cameras, but a lot of them now have that, right? The Wi-Fi kind of built in, that ability to shoot straight from the camera and have it go somewhere, whether it's up to the cloud or an FTP or what have you. Are you guys seeing a lot of that, say, in the wedding photography space? Are you seeing a lot of people take advantage of that?
I think what you're alluding to, I think you can do that. I like to be able to shoot something on my Sony camera and then Wi-Fi it right to my phone in an instant, and then I share a lot of times on social media. It's a much cleaner file, looks great. It's just kind of a fun little, I'll do that at weddings sometimes. One of my favorite pictures, and I'll send it quick to my phone, and then I'll show it to my couple, like within, a minute, usually, whatever. And they're like, how did you do it? Because they obviously saw me not take a picture with my phone. And they're like, oh my gosh, that's so exciting. And then if I happen to have, which I do most of the time, maybe at the end of the day, I've sent a few of my favorites to my own phone, just throughout the day. I'm not showing them every single one of them. And then at the end of the day, towards the end of the reception at some point, I'll text them a couple pictures. So they just have something to take away with them, and they don't usually notice it until like the next morning. That's my experience. And I'll get texts like, oh my gosh, these are amazing. We can't wait to see the rest. You were great. But, you kind of, it's just a little bit of a wow factor, not too much. I don't want to give them too much, but I want to just tease them a little bit.
Yeah, well, we're in this instant gratification society, right, where everybody wants it yesterday, and you're also competing with, the guests that are there that are taking photos and posting them online and things. I've seen you guys. I don't know if you saw this. Where did you see where James Day did their album?
Yeah.
The same day and presented their album at the reception.
Yeah.
No pressure.
Yeah, you're like, yeah, I won't be doing that.
Yeah. Is my album ready yet? You haven't cut your cake. Yeah, but is my album ready? So yeah, we're definitely in this instant, everybody wants it now and things. So yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of see where technology kind of goes. I want to ask you guys, because you guys both shot film. Film is making a little bit of a comeback with some photographers. Any tips, strategies? Do you guys still have film negatives kicking around? Because that stuff eventually will degrade and decay as well, right? Any tips for storing that stuff, or do you guys still have rooms full of negatives? Or
I don't have rooms full of them. I have a few boxes. I made it a habit, about after 3 years of my weddings to offer my negatives to sell to my clients, because of course I didn't want to store them forever. And of course I still have some negatives, from 10 or more years ago where people haven't ordered their albums. So of course I have to keep them. For all I know, they could be divorced, but I don't get rid of those. The ones where people, I called and they were called 3 times and said, hey, oh yeah, we want those. Like at some point I've just thrown them away and I don't care. because they were given ample opportunity to get them and come pick them up, and and I think people necessarily don't care, so I keep the important stuff. Of course, I have personal stuff that street photography and things in my travels over the year around the world that I have negatives of. And just to be very realistic, they're like in boxes. They're not stored amazing, but they're there. Will I ever go through them? Because typically, like at the time when I did a shoot like that with film, I would separate the negatives that I wanted, much like creating a favorites folder in today's world. And so I have those kept separately, and I know where they are. But all the other stuff that didn't make the cut, is in a box.
So would you guys say like that it's easier in some ways now in the digital world that we're in to protect this stuff than it was back, in the film days where it was more you had a physical negative and you pretty much...
Yeah, because Gary would have a hell of a lot of safes.
Safes.
Well, we had a 2,500 square foot warehouse that had just our negatives. It was so bulky. Well, it had the negatives and then the proofs, so it was massive. But talking about the cloud, because I started the lab at Pictage, the first weddings that we did were my own, and that was the film days. And honestly, we started Pictage when everyone was shooting film. And one of the value propositions we had was that we would scan your film and then keep a digital copy of it. Well, that was awesome because, I had 100 weddings on there I had negatives, but I also got, a DVD copy off of the Pictage server. And then also, up until a certain point, I think it was the third owner after we sold it, they just didn't have it anymore. I mean, I used to be able to call up and say, hey, I need this 1996 wedding. Can you pull it up? Yeah, we'll just stick it up on your event, and then it would be there, and I could download all the high res. And one day it was all gone. So, I don't have those anymore. So that's kind of a cloud story. But film. I'm surprised it's still around. I mean, not only did it have to go, it needs to go away for good.
Interesting. That might be a whole other debate we could have one day and bring on some film shooters.
Oh, that show, Why Film?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Why Film. Awesome. Well, before we move on and get into our listener question, any kind of final thoughts on kind of backup and archiving for wedding photographers?
I think you kind of alluded to it, Gary, but I just wanted to say for cloud storage, just to define, because I know people really care what you think. Top 3, if you were cloud services that you would recommend.
Well, Dropbox, and I say this really, really carefully because I think that cloud should only be used as a holding spot. Now, the other thing, and the reason why I say Dropbox is because it automatically reconciles between you and another offsite drive. So say you have a drive at your parents' house. Dropbox will reconcile that last event, and so that's automatically kept offsite. The thing about backup is convenience. If something's a hassle and you're a busy photographer, you just won't take that extra time to do stuff. And if it's just a simple thing, like as soon as I copy these SD cards, I'm sticking in an envelope and I'm going to put it inside my fire safe, and then once a week I'll drive to the safe deposit box or something like that. It's backed up to the cloud. You have the originals on your card. You have your working drive copies and everything like that. But I would say for safety and convenience, it would be Dropbox is number 1. And then, but you have to pay for Dropbox Pro. So of the free ones, I would say next would be Google. Google has unlimited free storage, but I think up to 4 megapixels, and then they charge after that. But we have compared them all, and I would say that Google, and then after that it becomes Amazon Cloud Storage. So it'd be Dropbox number 1, Google, and then Amazon. And then number 793rd would be Apple. Actually, they rank about there for every category that I can imagine right now.
Yeah. Have you guys used? Have you guys tried or used Mylio? Have you heard of that service, Mylio?
I have it and I use it. I haven't completely put everything up there, but it's a really interesting. So what Mylio is, for those of you listening, their kind of logo is your photos everywhere, and you put them up there. It's not a cloud storage, although they do have that option, and it will back them up to your cloud service of choice. but it syncs the images that you put on there with every device that you have, whether it be your iPhone, your iPad, your, home computer, your work computer. So basically, you can put it at one place, and then they're there. And you can, depending on where those files are stored, you can recall a high-res file from any one of the devices that you have, depending on where you are, if you want it. But otherwise, it's just a record, and they're doing a lot to it. They're adding more and more. I know some of the guys that have developed that product, and I know some of the stuff that's coming, which I can't say, but it's really interesting. It's a really interesting service. It's cool to be able to just go to your phone and like have all your photos. I mean, if you wanted to, let's say as wedding photographers, you could have every image from every single, and they're not stored on your phone. That's the thing. So you think, oh my gosh, that would take up my phone storage, but it's not. It's like a very small thumbnail, really easy, accessible galleries. It's a really pretty cool product.
So you can it's like an aggregator, right? Like you can feed different services like Flickr or Google Photos or Apple Photos.
It will pull your social media if you want. It'll, all of that. So yeah, you can always just sort of access anything, anywhere.
Yeah. I think Gary hit on an important point, though. I think you want to make sure that whatever, because there's a million different ways of doing this stuff, but I think you want to have it's something that's got to be simple. It's got to be fairly effortless. It's got to be something you don't even have to think about. It just kind of happens for you automatically, because as soon as you have to stop and think about it, you've got that human element in the chain that's always that's the fail point, right? You forget to take that drive to the office, or you bring the wrong drive home, or there's so many different things that can happen with getting it off site, or so anything you can do to set up that's kind of automatic. That being said, though, the one danger with automatic is sometimes you set it and you think it's working, and maybe it's not working. We've had clients like that put in backup software that's supposed to automatically be backing things up, and then a disaster happens and they go to do the restore only to find out that it hasn't been working, or it hasn't been backing up the right thing. So I think if you are doing some kind of a service or something that's an automated or scheduled, you want to check it periodically. Like try to do a restore, try to pretend like a fire drill, like pretend a what if scenario if my computer went down. Try and restore those things and make sure that everything you need is there, because it's when you don't need it that you don't want to find out that your thing's not working. It's when you need it and you find out it's not working, then it's kind of a disaster. So we had that happen once with a client where their server got stolen, and they were in fits because they didn't know what they were going to do. We said, no problem, we'll load your backup tape, and we'll get a new computer in for you and everything will be fine. And she's like, well, all our backup tapes broke except one, and we just had the same tape, we were using it over and over. And I said, well, where was it? She goes, oh, well, it was in the server. I said that they stole. Yeah. Okay, well, you're screwed. Basically was the point of that. So anything that's automatic, you want to never just always rely on it. You want to test it, check it, make sure that it's working, on a regular basis. Like your smoke alarms.
I would just really like to make it so super simple for everybody, and I would just suggest doing one thing different. As soon as you come from the event and download those cards, put those cards in an envelope and buy yourself a safe from Home Depot. Stick that envelope in the safe and then sleep really great, knowing that if your house goes down, because it's on a drive, it's been backed up to a cloud, but it's also sitting in a safe with the original cards. And keep those original cards forever. That's the cheapest backup. You don't even have to sit here and kind of twiddle your thumbs while files are being transferred. They're already there.
Mm-hmm.
When you ask yourself, what am I saving with $30 or $60 buying a new card? You're saving your time to transfer that 32 gigs over to 2 separate drives, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's simple. Just take those cards, copy them, stick them in an envelope, do whatever you want with your RAIDs and your Drobos and all that, knowing that it's always there. And let me add one more thing. You were talking about, what am I going to do with a floppy disk? This is when I videotaped the childbirth, I kept the camera and the power cord and the media inside, because I thought, hey, someday I won't be able to transfer this, and it might be a incompatible format. So I have the camera in the safe, the actual camera that took it. So
as long as plugs don't go away, you'll be fine.
Right. Yeah. Oh no.
There's no electricity. Awesome. Well, again, there's probably we could probably spend hours, digging into this stuff. There's so many different things we could talk about. But I think that's, I think the big takeaway for photographers is, make sure you have a system in place. Make sure that you have, don't have all your eggs in one basket. Make sure that you've got multiple copies. You should have it on, different types of media, and have at least one of those either offsite, for sure offsite if you can, but in the, immediate, say just after you've shot a wedding or whatnot, put it in something like a fireproof safe if you have one. Get it over to a neighbor's house, something, so that it's not, all your eggs aren't in one basket. So.
Right. Well, and here's a quick idea, based on what Gary said. I think that's a very simplistic, amazing idea. It's like just save those cards. I've thought about that before. I've actually done it in certain cases. Some of my celebrity stuff, I will do that, and I'll just keep those cards separate. But what if, just an idea for photographers, it's good for some, not for others. What if you added to your contract, media charge $100, and the client says, well, what's this? And they said, this is for, backup and archiving. Like, I only shoot on brand new cards one time every wedding, and then I use those as part of my storage solution to back up your job. And they're going to argue with you over $100. They might, of course, we know today's people. Mm-hmm. But I think more or less you could probably get away with that, and just, so you have your package that's, $2,000, $10,000, whoever you are, and you have a $100 media charge or whatever you want to make that, mm-hmm. just to cover your card costs, and you're good to go.
Yep. Good idea. Like plan. Yep. I like that plan. Excellent. All right. Well, let's move on. We lost Brian. Brian had to duck out. So in case we were wondering where Brian disappeared to, we weren't ignoring Brian. Brian had to duck out. So he's an important guy. He's at meetings all the time. So so we want to move on just to our next section, which is just a quick listener question. So each week we choose a listener question to answer on the show. And this week we've got a question from Darren LeBoeuf. Couples often ask me if I have a contingency plan in case I am sick or otherwise unable to shoot on the day of their wedding. In reality, my plan would be to frantically call all of the other suitable photographers that I know and hope one of them is available. Couples hire me because I have a certain style, so the best I can do is find someone who's close enough. What are your guys' contingency plans, and what do you tell your couples when they ask?
I addressed that in my contract. It says that, upon the client's approval, but yeah, I mean, I don't realistically, it would be the same as him. Of course, I have a whole slew of photographer friends that I could call, but, especially if it's a last minute thing, I don't know how there's any other way to do it, because obviously you want, you'd have probably your go-to person. Ideally, I'd love, Jay to do this for me, or whoever you're thinking. And, you go from there. But I think, maybe just like backup and archive and storage is something you should think about, something you should talk about. And maybe you have your, secret, not so secret network of 5 or 6 people where you all talk to each other. And, we all would put ourselves in that position and be happy to help. I've done it before myself. A photographer friend of mine broke his leg, although he was at the wedding. I did most of the stuff and he just kind of came, but we would do that. But it, might be something good for you to get a network of people to talk about. And, if you really wanted to be proactive every weekend, in that network, maybe you have some sort of group, on some sort of channel, and, you find out, all right, well, Dave and Lisa and Joe's shooting this weekend. They all have weddings, but Sam and Tony aren't. And so, you just kind of know who those, if you want to do it that way. But other than that, I don't know of another way to do it, because it's, I think it's harder to be proactive because you can't necessarily know when something's going to go wrong. You can be proactive by getting your group together, and then you have to be reactive when something does happen.
Mm-hmm. Gary, any thoughts on that?
Well, I haven't shot a wedding professionally in a long time. But if I were shooting today, I would just call Robert and I'd say, "Hey, you guys, you get a better photographer than me. This is you shot Brad's wedding, Brad's wedding here. You guys are." It's working out good for you.
Yeah.
No, but the amazing thing is I was never sick once in my 20-year career. That's pretty crazy.
That's crazy. That's good.
I say the same thing. Like, I've never missed a wedding. Yeah. I've shot weddings sick many times. As a matter of fact, we've talked about it on the show, but I just shot Jason Aldean's wedding at the end of March in Cancun, and I felt like garbage I had some sort of bronchitis. I had a fever. and I was by myself because that was the request of the client, and I just had to tough it out and just did it. They didn't, other than the planner kind of knew, but they had no idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think joining networks, joining us professional associations, building that network of other photographers who you trust and know. And again, you can't predict some things. Life happens, right? And you could have a death in the family or something like that. And I think generally couples, if it was something like that, and as long as you get them somebody, I think couples are going to be fairly understanding. You're not trying to leave them in the lurch. I think they'll do their best to understand. But yeah, I think just connecting and networking with photographers in your area, joining professional associations like the PPOC or the PPA, I think those can be valuable resources and networks and communities to kind of tap into. And when all else fails, just call Robert. Right? Robert will fly in because he'll hop on his private jet and fly in.
You could say to your clients, you know what, I'm deathly ill today and I can't use your wedding, and Rick's going to do it for me. But you know what, I have an amazing backup plan.
Yeah.
To archive and so you'll have your memories forever.
Yeah. Perfect. Excellent. Well, we want to thank Darren for his question, and we want to hear from you. So if you have a question for us, just head on over to thisweekinphoto.com, and you can leave your question in the comments, or you can also submit questions by sending us an email at twipwed@thisweekinphoto.com, or just send out a tweet and use the hashtag TWiPwed, and we'll keep our eye out for those as well. So our last segment here is just our picks of the week, and each episode we will share a photography-related item that we think would benefit wedding photographers, and our picks can be anything as long as they are somehow related to photography or the business of photography. So, Gary, since you're our guest this week, I'm going to let you go ahead and go first. What have you got for us?
Well, my latest toy is the Sony remote control app, and what it does is you can take your iPhone or your mobile phone and program it so that it wirelessly can show you what is going on through the viewfinder. I love that because a lot of times I'll do videos with myself, but then it goes further than that. What if you want to shoot a nest of a bald eagle and you want to put up your tripod in a certain spot and you want to be way over here just waiting and watching, making no noise? You can literally see the shot in here, change the exposure override, change the creative style, change the aperture, and then fire. And it's like having a cell phone that is just a camera with a 300mm lens on it. It's pretty. That's my favorite toy so far lately.
Very cool. Nice.
And how do you put that on the camera, Gary? How does an app work on a camera?
Oh, okay. So there's two ways that it works. The Sony cameras are really cool. They have what's called applications. And the applications have a store, which is the Sony Play Store. And it's just like you would have with the Google Play on your Android or your what's it called? iStore or whatever. App Store.
The App Store,
and you download different apps. They have apps for time-lapse. They have apps for action or stroboscopic. They have, Star Watch or whatever, but the one to look for would be the smart remote. You download that onto your camera, and then you download it onto your phone so that you each have a copy of what's called Sony Play Memories, and then you just turn it on, and on a Sony phone like this one, you just tap it on your computer. It's called NFC or near field communication, and it'll tap, and then the two will connect, and then they'll talk to each other. And it's very, very fast. You just press play memories, and then boop, you see right through the screen. You can change your focus spot and everything. And not on the A6000, but on the A7 series, you can actually film your videos that way. It's tremendously fun.
Very cool.
Excellent. Great pick. Mr. Evans, what's your pick for us this week?
Bruce, I'm going to turn it back to you because you never get to go first or second.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Well, I've actually got two picks. And they're related to backing up stuff. So my friends Rob and Lauren over at Photography Concentrate, they have a great ebook called Backup or Die. It's a little dire, but they do a really great job there of walking you through kind of a workflow and a system for backing up your images. So if you're stuck and you're just not sure where to start, that's a really good resource. Is Backup or Die from Photography Concentrate. And I also want to make a second pick. I'm going to make a pick here as well, and that's Gary. You've got a whole series of YouTube videos. You've been doing a lot of stuff on YouTube lately, and you've got a whole series kind of around this whole topic. Can you tell us just briefly a little bit about that series?
Yeah, we did a 3-part YouTube, and I think it's probably about an hour and a half or 2 hours long, and it literally takes you through the entire workflow of safety and my strategies, and it's free. There's no charge for it.
Awesome. And you can see some of the stuff you showed today, like the fire safe and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, everything. Yep.
Very cool. Yeah. Awesome. So we'll have a link to that in the show notes. If you want to check that out, head on over to the blog post for this episode. All right, Robert, what's your pick?
So I'm going to do, I've used them for years. I really like it. It's a pretty inexpensive, more than just a backup, but it's SmugMug. And people, I'm sure, have heard of SmugMug. I really like the platform. You can create a website around it if you want for your business. But you can, they have a couple different levels. But one of the things is unlimited storage. They allow you to have as much on it. They never charge you anymore, or never say never. But it's fairly inexpensive. You can have like a basic, which is just $60 a year, and that's unlimited storage. There's a power account, which I believe is about $95 a year. Their portfolio account is about $240 a year, and then their business is $420. The higher accounts are like if you also want to do sales, and do that. But if you literally just wanted to use SmugMug, I mean, I think I pay the middle one, the power maybe, and I use it for unlimited. I probably have 4 terabytes of images up there over the years. I don't use SmugMug to put everything up there, but I do a lot of my non-wedding stuff there. I create, portfolio galleries, vendor galleries. A lot of my portrait sittings and stuff go there for archive and backup. It's just a really great tool, and it does so many other things. But just go check it out for yourself at smugmug.com, and really, really great place to also to view. And I can't say enough about it. I've really enjoyed using the product over the years.
Awesome. So you're the 600-pound guy that shows up at the all-you-can-eat buffet.
Why are you still here? You go home.
There's no more cheesecake.
That was well done, Robert, actually.
You remember that? Well, that's a Louis Anderson bit. You remember that? Like, he talks about being in a Chinese all-you-can-eat restaurant, and if those of you who don't remember who Louis Anderson, he's a very large comedian, probably 400, 300 pounds, and he would do this bit where he would talk about he's at the Chinese buffet and the owner would pace behind him and be like, "You go now! You go home! Why are you still here?" And it was just funny because just the contrast of him and the idea of that. And so.
Excellent. Good pick. Well, again, we'll have links to all those things in the show notes for this episode. Well, and then that brings us kind of to the end of another episode of TWiP Weddings. We want to thank our sponsors for their support, and we want to remind everybody to send in your questions for the show and share your thoughts by commenting on the blog post for this episode. So before we kind of wrap it up, what's everybody up to? Where can our audience go if they want to keep up with what you're up to and things you have happening? Gary, where can people find you?
GaryFong.com.
That's kind of the central hub for all things Gary Fong?
Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. And Mr. Evans, how about yourself?
Same thing with me, robertevans.com, but all my social media is pretty around my name, at Robert Evans Instagram, at Robert Evans Twitter, Facebook, all those things.
Yep, good stuff. If you're looking for Brian, he had to duck out, but of course you'll find him over at the Sprouting Photographer podcast. He's also on Twitter, Instagrams, all that kind of good stuff. So we'll put links to all his profiles. If you're looking for me, you'll find me at my website, which is momentsindigital.com, or I'm on most of the social networks as Bruce Clark, with an E at the end of Clark. And of course, be sure to visit our website at thisweekinphoto.com to learn more and to listen to some of the other great shows that are on the This Week in Photo network. So thanks again for listening to TWiP Weddings, raising the bar one wedding at a time.